Hi, I'm Laura Flanders. Capitalism's crisis deepens? To many people, it looks more ascendant than ever. The coming to power of a billionaire without even the facade of public service, backed by hedge funders and war profiteers. To a lot of people, the rise of Donald Trump and Trumpism represents the ascendancy galore of capitalism, not its crisis. Economics professor Richard Wolff respectfully disagrees. Wolff's the founder of Democracy at Work and the host of Economic Update, a weekly podcast, as well as the author of many books, most recently, Capitalism's Crisis Deepens. In this week's conversation, he's joining Farah Tanis, who also believes in building authentic, alternative livelihoods. It's the only way that many communities, especially communities of color, have ever survived periods of repression. And it's the way to build the world we want to live in the future, regardless of who's in the White House. Farah is the co-founder and executive director of Black Women's Blueprint, which recently chaired the first Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Black women and sexual assault in the United States. Welcome both. I couldn't be happier than to be sharing the beginning of this challenging year with the two of you.
Thank you.
Let's start with some descriptions. Farah, how do you describe the situation that we're in? How do you see it?
I can only speak with the hundreds and the thousands, if not the millions of voices of people of African descent throughout this country who are fearful, extremely fearful, fearful about their own present, their economic security, fearful about whether or not their right to make a living, their right to have access to education. You know, there's this dissipation, there's this disappearing of this hope that we had before that we could ever get anywhere, even under the Obama presidency. You know, the loss of jobs, it's become more real than ever. Student loan debt has become more real than ever. The lack of access to health care, even under Obamacare, has become more real than ever. And whatever little bits that we had, we now feel that we're going to lose. And so there is, I will be honest in saying this, sheer panic.
Yeah. What about you, Rick?
I think capitalism is weaker than it's been in my lifetime. And I know that when I share cups of coffee with my left-wing and right-wing colleagues, we don't agree on how we got into this mess, and we don't agree on how to get out. But we are amazed as we look at each other over our coffee that we all agree that this is the worst condition of the American economy in our lifetimes. So that, yes, you can always find a few statistics that make things look good. But if you look at the overall trajectory, the truth of the matter is we are facing a Trump presidency because the mass of Americans are dissatisfied. That's what the vote for Bernie indicated. That's what Occupy Wall Street began. We're in a time in which the system isn't working for most people. They know it. They just don't know where exactly to go with their understanding. And that means capitalism has failed to generate the support among the mass of people without which its future is very much in doubt.
But as I said, a lot of people will look at the last election and say, American people just elected a gazillionaire who basically run on precisely that. Where do you see the disappointment with capitalism?
Because I think the hallmark of his race was to suggest he's not like the normal routine that has run this society for as long as anyone can remember. Mrs. Clinton lost that election, in my judgment, because she represented the continuation, more or less, of what we've had. Tweedledum, Tweedledee, now this one, now that one, where nothing changes, where the deterioration continues. And he said, by being outrageous and provocative, he said, I'm different from all of those people. And in a society where there's not much hope given for better future, you might as well go with somebody who's different, who maybe will change it, than to stay with what you know has been unable or unwilling to make the changes that could affect your life.
So provocative, like racist, misogynist.
And not apologizing, not stepping back, but kind of doubling down as he used to do and still does, saying crazy things. He is articulating the anger, the rage, the wanting to break out of what we've been stuck in, and that got him a lot of sympathy because the alternatives, there was one real one, and that was Bernie. And when Mrs. Clinton repressed that, sort of like when Obama repressed Occupy, you took away the opportunity for the American dissatisfaction to go in a left direction, so it went in the other direction that was available.
You're listening to The Laura Flanders Show. For more information, go to lauraflanders.com. Mostly not black dissatisfaction.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I was thinking when you talk about, capitalism more recently having failed the population. When you talk about the we that is dissatisfied, for us, capitalism has never worked. We were the original commodity, right, in the United States when you look at the legacy of slavery. And then when you look at women in general, we were the original commodity worldwide. In terms of the beginning, the birth of capitalism was really on the backs and on the ownership of women's bodies. And then that became more and more amassing of property. But talking about this election in particular, I think that black folks were in a place where they felt that even with the mistakes of the Obama administration, even with a Hillary Clinton presidency, right? And you talked about Bernie, that was the hope, right? That we would have Bernie and there would be a more of a socialist sort of, system put in place. But we've never been confident. We've never been satisfied. We've never received, historically, we've never received our just dues. We can talk about reparations. We can talk about, access to education and to jobs. We can talk about affirmative action. None of these things have done for black people what we hope that they would do.
So how come we can't make a winning coalition out of the people that you've just described as unhappy and the people you've just described as unhappy? What's the problem?
I think that these conversations are not happening enough. I think that with all due respect, that white folks are seeing this one way because the historical context is very different, and black folks are seeing it in another way because our historical context has been different.
Thoughts, Rick?
Yeah, I think that we do see these things differently, but that's always been the case, and I don't think that'll go away real quickly. I think we can still make a coalition out of the fact that people who see things differently can find enough that they have in common to begin to struggle together. And my hope is precisely that the different way in which African Americans and white Americans have come to their current impasse may make them able now to see the value and possibility of coalition in a way that has been much harder in the past.
Did you see any example? Oh, Farah, you want to come in?
Around capitalism, I'm not sure that there is, or I think that the work would be it would be tremendous. It would require tremendous effort on the part of progressives, both on, white progressives and black progressives, community-based organizations. We start from the bottom up. And so the grassroots community, the grassroots community that you saw at the Occupy movement, the white activists are very different from what you see with the Black Lives Matter movement. The demands are different.
And yet, when it comes to this question of alternatives to capitalism, one of the reasons I wanted to bring the two of you together is when I look for models of survival, of solidarity economics, including many of the worker-determined enterprises that you study and write about, Rick, people in leadership are women of color, people of color, immigrants, disproportionately, whether you're talking home health care workers in New York or activists in the Jackson, Mississippi area building on the tradition and history of the Black land movement. So I see the Black community as one of the communities with the most expertise on exactly the kind of stuff that you're saying needs to be lifted up as a model. Am I crazy here?
No, I think that, in fact, this bottom-up that Farah talks about is exactly the new direction. And it is a new direction for traditionally socialistically minded people, that they're not about, as they were, white people, but all people, I would argue. They aren't any more enamored, as they once were, about the government coming in and being the progressive force as opposed to the private. That distinction, that dichotomy is fading. And what instead is happening is, it's not about the government. It's about starting at the bottom, in the factory, in the office, in the store, to transform that workplace from the top down, minority running everything, the shareholders, the board of directors, who are inevitably in this culture white or overwhelmingly white, and male, that's right. Stop all of that. Make it a one person, one vote. Everybody who works in the workplace has an equal say in what's produced and how it's produced. This radical transformation at the base is a new way of defining what progressive means and allows us in one act of reorganizing production to begin to talk about giving equality where it really counts to the women, to the non-whites, and others as part of an integrated workforce as a project for transformation. I think that is the wave of the future, and it's a new way of defining progressivity that the old establishment isn't ready to confront because they're still fighting the battle with a socialism that talks about a big government, which isn't the issue anymore.
You're listening to The Laura Flanders Show. For more information, go to lauraflanders.com.
Solidarity economy exists throughout the world, right? And it's successful throughout the world, and especially throughout the global South. In the United States, to begin to have a conversation around solidarity economy, whether it is about land ownership, whether it is about, starting businesses where everyone shares decision making, everyone shares profits, whether it's a barter network, whether it is a people's bank, there needs to be trust built. And I think that for us, poverty and lack of access and the lack of economic security has been so traumatizing. And so what I want to just emphasize is just the difference in just the pathways. I think that there are ways, based on what was just said, there is definitely hope for coming together in coalition, but there needs to be honest conversation. It's almost like there needs to be a reckoning, not only with, white America, but also with ourselves, acknowledging where we've come from, because trust needs to be built in order for solidarity economy to exist and for it to succeed.
I mean, even with respect to the conversation about government, I think we have to figure out where to meet, because for a lot of white working class people, government is synonymous with the IRS and taxes. For entrepreneurs, business regulations. For a lot of people of color and women, it's synonymous with voting rights, civil rights, enforcement of my, rights in the workplace. I think there are other ways that we can secure our rights without depending, whistling for the cops and depending on government, but we don't have a lot of great models. At least I don't. Do you have some, Farah?
I think we have some amazing models. I mean, I know that I've heard of models from, Chile and different parts of South America, but there are models throughout Africa, which have existed for centuries. These are ancient models. There are models throughout the Caribbean, even in the United States, during Reconstruction, post-emancipation. What was happening, because we had nothing as Black folks post-slavery, is that families were helping each other. There were those Black folks who had been freed, who had more than others, who were helping each other. No one starved. Well, some starved, but we made sure that if we knew that someone was starving, that if we were eating, they were eating. If we had clothing on our backs, they had clothing on our backs. If we had a business, that they were the ones that were hired, because where else could they go? It was the same thing with the building of all the historically Black colleges and universities. Even in that arena, there needed to be solidarity economy built around. And when I think of education, I think of it in a parallel sense with development goals in other countries, because through education, you can really frame it within development goals because of what you can achieve, because of the pathway to having something, to owning something, to having wealth. And so there are models here. There are models we have at Black Women's Blueprint in particular. I talked about the barter network, where we barter time, we barter services, and we barter rides, we barter childcare, we barter food, we barter housing, and no money exchanges hands. And it's very difficult because people tend to say, well, why can I pay you for that instead? And we say, no. You don't even have to do anything and barter anything right now. Just, right now, if you need this, take it. you know, and then later on we can build community and we can come up with what can we exchange
And
for.
I've read history. I don't think this is a purely black thing.
No.
Not at all, not at all. And I think what Farah's telling us is there's plenty in the history of the African American community to show initiative and experiments and original ways of proceeding in a non-capitalist, non-exploitative way to solve your economic problems. But all communities have that. It's an ideological struggle that's been going on to repress that information, to repress that memory, to repress all those models. I mean, let's give you a few. In New England, the way a farm community would develop, nobody had the time as a farmer to build their own barn. It's a very old story. So the way a barn got built, these are white people, the way a barn got built was everybody got together on a Saturday and built the barn for John, and then 2 weeks later for Mary, and for, you know, and so on. And they understood that each of them was better off by the collective effort of one another. And this is as old as Methuselah. You have had to teach it out of the American people, white and black, so that they don't understand that their own history gives them alternatives. It's part of the effort to suggest that not only is capitalism the best thing since sliced bread, is the only thing, and therefore anything else is some kind of vague, hopeless endeavor. I talk a lot about examples around the world, and there are many of them, in order to drive home mainly the point that you don't have to be so narrowly blinkered in how you think. There are these other models, and given a time when capitalism is not working for so many people, this is the right moment to explore those models and recover them.
I mean, ironically, we call it the informal economy. Yeah. In the United States, it's $1 trillion rich. Yes. What gets traded in that so-called informal economy, which includes the barter networks you're talking about. It has been what has kept our economy together, it seems like, to me.
But in another society, I recently did a little vignette for somebody about the John Lewis Partnerships, one of the biggest department stores in Great Britain, and has been for a long time. It's a cooperatively organized enterprise. All the workers are partners. They all get the same percentage of the profits as a bonus at the end of the year. Is it a fully fledged cooperative? No. But compared to a typical American corporation, it's light years down the path of partnership. This is Great Britain. Most of the savings banks in Germany are cooperatives run collectively for the people who deposit. Mondragon is the 7th biggest corporation in Spain and has been a real workers' co-op for 65 years. I mean, these are enterprises that compete and outcompete their capitalist counterparts. They are successful. They last a long time. There are plenty of models and much experience to use.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned Mondragon, because the Mondragon collaboratives, when we look at them today, we might forget that they came up in an era of repression. They came up in opposition to help people survive the dictatorship of the fascist regime of Franco. Could we be building today in our regime, in our conditions of repression to various degrees, what we need for the future? I mean, is this a time when it's possible to build what could be the things we want to live with down the road, as the Mondragon people did, Farah?
I think this is absolutely the time.
Even when people are as afraid and scared as you mentioned?
Because we're afraid and scared, because there is no other alternative, because people are sick and tired of living in communities and working for organizations and corporations where they put profit over people. So it's the perfect time. But it's so wonderful that you're having this conversation. This is a conversation that needs to be had across the country, and it's the work of, I would say, since I'm part of a nonprofit organization, it's the work of nonprofit organizations who are doing economic justice work. It's the work of women. There's a Women's March on Washington happening in January, and I think that needs to be part of the agenda. Reproductive justice is part of the agenda. Violence against women is part of the agenda. The economy needs to be part of the agenda. But we need to move beyond just equal pay within these corporations. We need to move to conversations about owning our own and really taking care of each other. And I know it sounds like it's kumbaya, but it works. People have survived because of it. Women have been able to purchase homes, purchase land because of it. I mean, it becomes about your very survival. We stay alive. We've stayed alive because of these models.
You're listening to the Laura Flanders Show podcast. Want to receive our podcast every week? Sign up at iTunes or wherever it is you get your podcasts. You can get more information at lauraflanders.com. Well, I hear my mission for the next 12 months and beyond is to keep having these conversations. What's yours, Rick?
Well, I think it's to pick up also on what we're doing here and to drive home that the conditions, as Farah said, now are, at the one hand, bad for most people, but precisely because of that, there's an opening and a desire to look for new directions to get out of the hole we're in. I wanted to remind everyone that Mondragon didn't only happen with the repressive regime of Franco, but it happened in the Basque country of northern Spain, traditionally very, very poor, made even more poor first by the Spanish Civil War in the 30s, then by World War II. So they were really desperate. And the Catholic priest who started it was quoted as having said to his parishioners, "If we wait for some capitalist to come here and give us a job, we'll all die of old age before it happens. We have to do it for ourselves." And that gives us two lessons. One, that can work, because they went from 6 workers when they started to 100,000 today. That's a record of success most capitalist enterprises don't get close to. But it also suggests that people you might not know are your allies, like a Catholic priest in a village, can turn out to be not only your ally, but your patron, the person who takes you through and protects you. And we will be surprised, I think, also in the United States by how many folks will get involved if they see this as a possibility, even as we have been surprised by how many people came forward in the Dakota frozen waste to stand for something they could believe in too.
The pipeline. Closing thoughts, Farah?
Oh, my word. Well, I think that one of the things that we really need to not forget about is, women bear the brunt of the poverty burden in the United States and everywhere in the world. I think that there's the cyclical relationship between poverty and the increased rates of violence against women and girls, the exploitation, the high risk, the risk heightened for girls for sexual exploitation. I mean, that is something that is very, it's something that's ignored. It's something that's neglected. I think that for me, in the next 12 months, in addition to conversations about solidarity economy, in addition to building hope in whatever way that we can by demonstrating that it works with small groups of women, I think that the impetus, like the how, the why, it's so important to us, and the why we need to do it because it's really about our lives and the lives of our future generation of girls, that needs to be part of what we do. That's what I'm committing to do, to make sure that violence is reduced in our communities, to make sure that our self-esteem is heightened, to make sure that more of us go to college and graduate from college. I mean, if we have to participate in a capitalist society, like, what does it mean? Most of us don't even know what that means. When we talk about equal pay, what does it mean? So we need that education about all of it, the world we're living in, whether it's about capitalism or solidarity economy. We need to know what we're talking about.
I think the safer we make women, the more independently they will vote also. So it's good for our democracy, too. Thank you. Farah, Tanis, Rick Wolff, I love you both. I really appreciate your work. I hope that we get to do much more of this year, and maybe that's one of the good things about it. I'm Laura Flanders. You can find out more about Black women's blueprint and economic update and democracy at work at our website. Thanks for watching. That's it for this week. I want to thank everyone who made this report possible. If you want to help keep coverage like this coming, please follow the links and contribute at lauraflanders.com. And if you want to tell me what you think, write to me. That's laura@lauraflanders.com. LAURA@lauraflanders.com. Thanks a lot. We'll be back next week. I'm I'm Laura Flanders, host and executive producer of The Laura Flanders Show. We'd like to thank supervising producer Anna Barsan, video editor Marceline Farah, podcast editor Tina Hanai Miller, engagement and development director Monica Mohapatra, design and operations director Danica D'Souza. Special thanks to all of our guests who so graciously came on our show today, as well as to all of you listening at home. Contributions from listeners like you make this work possible. So thank you.